Everybody, it's Dr. Joe again on this Wealth Wednesday. Hope everyone's doing fine, having a great week, hopefully. Having a good week. Made some offers on some houses, and we shall see if anything comes through. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Yeah, so we shall see. But the market is definitely slowing down, which means that for those people who are take a long-term view of real estate, which is what I kind of been talking about and emphasizing for the last few months. Now is the time to get ready, position yourself, because there's going to be some good opportunities in the next few months, weeks, months, and so on. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about 7 most common landlord-tenant disputes. 7 most common landlord-tenant disputes. And for anybody who's been to landlord-tenant court, it's a very humbling experience. Been there many times. It depends on the state that you're in, the jurisdiction that you're in. You could be in a pro landlord state, or you could be in a pro tenant state. If you're in a pro landlord state, then obviously you usually have the upper hand. If you're in a pro tenant state, then it is what it is. Sometimes the tenants can kind of get the better of you. So what I wanted to talk about today is based on my experiences. Being a landlord for over 30 plus years, and having been to landlord tenant court many times. I don't go there very often. Well, mind you, we have COVID, so a lot of the landlord tenant court cases are virtual now. But prior to COVID, I used to go there every now and then. But I used to go even if I didn't have any cases, just to kind of go there, check out what's going on, hear the latest cutting edge excuses from tenants, and find out how judges are ruling, and also just generally become more educated, acquainted with trends and the law and things like that. So so based on those experiences, I want to kind of talk about some of the disputes, the common disputes that that I'm familiar with, and maybe you are familiar with if you are a landlord. And hopefully if you are not a landlord, you become a landlord, you can be aware of some of these common dispute items, so that you can sort of be proactive and hopefully be a lot wiser. So anyway, let's get back to it then. So the thing, again, as normal, we're gonna have our Q&A session towards the end. So if you got some questions, feel free to put it in the chat box, and what's it called? I'll get to them towards the end of the meeting. So enter your questions in the chat box. As usual, I'll try to answer as many of the questions as I can, and then we'll get to it. Okay, so let's talk about this topic of the day, which is the 7 most common landlord-tenant disputes. 7 most common landlord-tenant disputes. So what are they? Anyway, let me give you a little background. We all know that as a landlord, it's a great vehicle. Real estate is a great vehicle to build wealth, get cash flow, establish a legacy, hopefully, provide for you and I and we in retirement, or to help with family expenses, family finances, like whether it be college kids or college funds or whatever it is. Real estate has been proven as a vehicle for that. However, on that journey, you will, it's just the way it is. You will experience disputes with your tenants. And those issues will arise, issues that it may rack your brain, it may frustrate you, but they will arise, and that's just the way it is. So, a tenant could see you as, too strict or bossy, kind of interjecting yourself in all kind of situations, while you as a landlord may find out that the tenant is not always cracked up to be once they're in your house. And hopefully you won't have a tenant from hell. But we're living in a very pro tenant jurisdiction in the Washington D.C. area. And so it's very easy to get someone in your house. They can pull a fast one. They can say all the things that you want to hear. And but once they're in, once you sign the lease, once they've got the keys, the relationship changes. And it can be very difficult to get them out. So it's easy to get someone in your house, but it can be a lot more difficult to get them out once they're in there. So based on experience, the disagreements, disputes that you're going to have, they'll really run the gamut from in terms of sort of the scope of these disputes. Many factors contribute to these landlord-tenant disputes. They range from disagreements about the terms of the lease. Many times, like me, I have a 20-page lease. And so for the most part, a tenant's not going to read every single page, every single line item, every single word of that lease. Hopefully you've got a pretty strong lease as well, and not one of those things you get from the local sort of Walmart or Target or Home Depot leases. I don't know if they have those. Anyway, but you don't, those basic one-page leases, you don't want one of those things. But there are terms in your lease that, the tenant just may not understand. So there could be some disagreements about those terms. For me, I like to go through the most important terms before we sign the documents. Sometimes I just send a copy of the lease, the blank lease, to the tenant, so that gives them a chance to review it. And I tend to highlight the most important things, so that way there's no misunderstanding in terms of expectations. They understand what it is that they look, what I'm expecting from them, and we kind of we start the relationship on a positive professional level. So interpretation of the lease, interpretation of maintenance of the rental property, disagreements are bound to happen, but the best and probably the only way to truly avoid it, you know what that is? The best and probably truly the best way to avoid these problems, in my experience, I'm going to talk about that later on, at least to minimize the risks of running into some of these disputes that I'm going to talk about today, is through communications, talking, texting, emailing, communicating with your tenant. Because I found that if you can speak to each other in a spirit of cooperation, you can usually kind of resolve things, work things out. For example, today, let's say, I'll give you an example this week. I had a tenant who had, I think it was on Friday, her hot water heater, literally broke and started flooding her unit. She's been there, at least 7 years. And so there was a leak. I think, the hot water heater, for whatever reason, it decided to, malfunction. And so it started leaking water and started flooding a part of her basement. Anyway, she called me up and, all, kind of upset and obviously concerned. And as you know, I have home warranties on all my properties. So I knew this is a covered item on my home warranty policy. So I called the home warranty company and they assigned it to a plumbing company. And the plumbing company came, realized that the hot water heater had to be replaced, and it couldn't be repaired. It had to be replaced. And they called it into the home warranty company, and it was agreed to replace the unit. And so the unit was replaced. It cost a few dollars out of pocket on my side, but the bottom line is that we communicated throughout the whole process between the tenant and I. And as a result of that, we're able to work through some of her concerns, and we got the unit replaced. There was like a a day or two where she didn't have any hot water, but because we have good relationship, because we communicated, she was okay. Well, I would say she was okay with that, but she was, you know, she understood that I was doing the best that I can to resolve the problem, and the problem was resolved, and we moved on. She didn't call the city. She didn't call, her attorney. We're able to work it out through communications. Okay, so disputes. The point is, communications is really, I think, the key to resolving a lot of the issues that I'm going to discuss today. Okay, so it's important that the tenant is comfortable enough to be able to call you and ask you questions, and you have the the relationship whereby you can provide honest answers to the questions that they may have. Okay, if you don't, then you're going to need to address that, because it's just a matter of time before you're going to have a dispute, which will which could sort of spiral out of control. So that it's essentially the tenant should feel comfortable with the relationship whereby they can call you, and hopefully you have a relationship with a tenant whereby you can contact them, and through all stages of your tenants, whether it be the beginning, the middle, or hopefully not the end. With that said and done, let's talk about these 7 common disputes. That in my experience, number 1, obviously, the biggest common dispute, the biggest reason why most landlords take their tenants to court, the biggest reason why tenants get evicted is because of non-payment of rent. Okay, so that's number 1. The biggest dispute is all activities associated with non-payment of rent. So easily, this is the biggest one. This is the large one. There are obviously there are an array of factors as to why a tenant will decide not to pay, okay, and or they or may fall behind on their rent. If there's a whole host of reasons. They could lose their jobs, they could run into sort of unforeseen situations. They could have expenses may have tripped up them. I mean, there's so many issues that will result in the tenant not paying you, or partially paying you the rent. Okay, and now this is based on my experience, having gone through 4, and we're probably kind of going through the 5th downturn. Okay, the cycle turn is that as the market shifts. I mean, today I think I read in the news that Microsoft, for example, is laying off 10,000 people. 10,000 is kind of crazy number. Facebook is laying off, thousands of people. Amazon's laying off thousands of people. I mean, there's a lot of people that are going to be let go from their jobs. And take it from me, there is nothing worse than a great tenant who has lost their job. I mean, they're a good person. They mean well. They just can't pay you. Okay. And so you're going to have a very uncomfortable discussion with this tenant. And, so non-payment of rent is going to be a big issue for a lot of landlords as we enter a recession, as we enter into a down market. And that's one of the reasons why I have decided to go with Section 8, because it really doesn't matter if the tenant loses their jobs. If they lose their jobs, they just go off to the housing authority, and their rent portion goes down in proportion to their rent, to their income, and so on. So it's really, that's one of the, having gone through these cycles several times, it's so important. I've learned so important during a downturn that you have a consistent income stream. It's really, really important, and that's why that guaranteed rent. I know a lot of people don't like Section 8, but that guaranteed rent is something to to be happy for when other landlords aren't getting paid, and so on. So we can talk about Section 8 another time. I don't want, that's not the purpose of today. Tenants may send you bad checks. They may start lying about that they can't pay you, or the check's in the mail, or I mailed it to last week. I don't understand why I haven't received. I mean, you hear all kind of excuses, and so on. So to prevent disputes, especially when it pertains to rents, make sure that the tenant understands what your rules are. Have policy, rent payment policies. Make sure that you explain to them when the rent is due, when a late fee is it's going to be tacked on, what will happen on certain dates if the rent is not received. Okay, these and some of these tenants, especially when they don't have any money, you'll see a lot of that in landlord tenant court. Well, they'll start saying, well, the reason why I'm not paying you is because there's something wrong with the house. Okay, I'm going to withhold part of the rent because of ABC needs to be fixed and so on. So, I mean, that's sometimes a scam. Sometimes it's legitimate. But, I've heard all those kind of, situations. People try and do that. So you have to be careful, and spell all these things out as part of your agreement. And, but the reality is that life happens. People do lose their jobs, and sometimes people can't pay you. What do I do? A little, a pro tip. I have my assistant to do research on all these different rental assistance or utility assistance programs that are out there. So I'm kind of proactive. So, so therefore, if a tenant runs into difficult times, I can refer them to organizations or programs where there's some forms of rental assistance available or utility assistance available. So it kind of turns the relationship around. So now I'm perceived as somebody who's trying to help the tenant. Okay. And we work as a partnership in applying for some of these funds, some of these monies that's out there. So that's what I do. And a little pro tip there. Hopefully that was helpful. And but some tenants unfortunately will want to take advantage of you, and therefore you got to make sure that you have all those things in place such that you're not sort of being abused and so on. Okay, so that's number one. Is the most common form of dispute is the non-payment of rent. The second most important common dispute pertains to security deposits, the good old-fashioned security deposit. That's a real big sticking point, because obviously a tenant, we all know a security deposit is money that is paid by the tenant to the landlord prior to moving in. In the event that there's any damages or whatever it is, then it's subtracted from that security deposit. Now, we all know the tenant always wants their money back, all their money back, and you want to protect yourself in the event that there's some, there's things that you have to subtract. So, what kind of things, typically you can subtract or you can withhold from the tenant security deposit? Obviously, unpaid rent, any damages caused by the tenant, if you have to clean the unit, if you have to store the tenant's belongings for any reason, they didn't take everything out. These are legitimate reasons why if there's any, damage beyond what they call normal wear and tear, these are legitimate reasons why you can withhold, part or all of the security deposit. Unpaid rent, repairs, damage beyond normal wear and tear. If you have to clean the unit, if you have to store the property, there's a whole host of different things. I've just given you 4 or 5 examples. In many states, but you need to understand what your laws are in the jurisdiction or the state that you're in. Many states have very strong, strict security deposit laws where you as a landlord have to return that security deposit, at least provide some kind of accounting of those funds. Usually it varies anywhere from 21 days up to 60 days. I know in the Washington, D.C. area, it's like 45 to 60 days. Where you are, it may be slightly different. But there are laws, and you need to understand those, because, you will be held if you don't, sort of be in compliance with that. So what I do, again, another pro tip, before the tenant moves in, I tend to go through the house room by room to make sure we validate and verify the condition of the property before the tenant moves in. Okay, room by room. What's the condition of the walls, the floors? Is the faucet working? Is the garbage disposal working? Are the windows working? And we go through all of that. Okay, and we verify the condition of the house on day one before the tenant moves in. And it's a pretty detailed checklist. And that checklist is available, plus other documents if you want, from our website for purchase. I'm not trying to pitch it, but there are a lot of documents which I use, my leases, my move-in documents, and I think about 9 or 10 of them are available. So you may want to go to the website if you're interested. That's joeasamoah.com, www.joeasamoah.com. So anyway, but the idea is that to reduce the likelihood of disputes, that I just learned the hard way. That's the reason why I do that detailed walkthrough prior to the tenant moving in, because the tenant's always going to say, well, when I moved in here, that this wasn't working. Well, that wasn't working. Well, that condition was this way. There was a hole in the wall when I moved in. Da 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 da. No, we verify the house, the condition of the walls, the floors, the doors, the windows before you moved in. And here's your signature. You checked it off. Okay. So any damage that's caused is because of you. Okay. It wasn't because of me, because you verified the condition of the house before you moved in. And I go a little bit extra in one of my moving checklist document. I put a price if I have to take care of that item. So if there's damage to the walls or holes in the walls, it may cost $20 or $30 or whatever it is. It's written in that document. So that way they know exactly how much is going to be subtracted from their security deposit. It's itemized as a line item. So, once all is said and done, I try to do a walkthrough with a tenant there as well. On the final move out day. That way we both confirm the condition of the house once everything's out of there. And then I'll do an accounting of any damages and subtract it from that. Any utilities that's owing, we'll subtract from that. And the rest of that will then give it back to the tenant as an itemized accounting of their security deposit. Now, I know in this area, we have to, the security deposit is supposed to be held in an escrow account earning interest. So you have to, include some interest on the accounting as well. So the second dispute pertains to security deposit. Again, if you got some questions, please use the chat box. I'm going to try to get to them later on, and so on. So what's number 3? Number 3 is, another point is pet deposits. You have the right to collect a pet deposit during the tenancy. Now, there's a caveat, obviously. And I'll explain that in a second. Pet deposits can be a little tricky though, because they may perceive, depending on the state that you're in, perceive the pet deposit as part of the security deposit. Okay, and there are laws as to how much you can charge for a security deposit. In the DC area, in Washington, DC, for example, a security deposit cannot be more than 1 month's rent. Okay, some places it cannot be more than 2 months' rent, and so on. So that's the way it gets a little tricky if you are including the pet deposit as part of the security deposit, because if you're on a state whereby you cannot collect more than 1 month's rent, and you've already got your rent for the regular security deposit, then your pet deposit may not be valid. It could be exceeding the 1 month. Do you follow me? So you have to be careful how you define the pet deposit. I would definitely differentiate it and clearly state this is not a security deposit. This is purely for the event of damage caused by the pet. And you need proof and documentation about the pet. The only caveat, the only one problem area is to be aware of is that there are laws about what they call emotional support and service dogs, service animals. So you may not be able to request a pet deposit for those things. So that's something you need to be aware of. Be careful about trying to include the security deposit and the pet deposit. I would separate those two, because if a tenant skips out and doesn't pay you the rent for a month, and the tenant animal caused damage, then if you don't have a what's it called, pet deposit, or some kind of pet retainer, then you could be out of pocket. Okay, so I know for me, I typically charge around, I don't normally allow pets, but I think every now and then I do. If a tenant has been with me for a number of years and they've proven to be a good tenant, I will, and they lobby hard to get a pet. I would sometimes agree, and there's a security deposit or a pet deposit that's charged. It could be anywhere about $400 or $500, and but that's in the event that the pet itself caused damage. But there are rules. If in doubt, look at your state rules as to the pet deposits, and it may be a good idea to get a copy of or at least understand what the dog breed is, and the size of the dog or the animal, and also the weight. Okay, so as you can see, pet deposits, it's very specific, and it's a common dispute area. It can be tricky, especially if you have an emotional support animal, or a service animal as well. Okay, so a lot of gray areas. So it's in your I think in your benefit to learn a bit more about pet deposits or any issues pertaining to pets. Okay, so got to number 3. Let's again, if you got some questions, enter them in the chat box. I will get to them very shortly, and let's have some questions down. Get it ready, and then we'll talk at the end of the next session. So I've done 3 so far. Number 1 is non-payment rent is the biggest issue. Second one is security deposits, and the third one pertains to the pet deposits. And so let's get on to number 4. Number 4 is property damage. Damages, that's a big dispute area. Damages caused by the tenant during their tenancy. So it's really important to kind of identify what is considered normal wear and tear caused by the tenant or their guest. Okay, I think that's important, and I don't need to go through all of that right now, but it's important to appraise yourself. Obviously, if someone's living in your home, you can expect scuff marks on the walls. You can expect some traffic on the carpets if you have carpets. So I mean, you can expect minor repairs are going to, little nicks on the walls, because people live there. They have furniture, they have people walking around, and so on. That's considered normal wear and tear. Now, normal wear and tear is not like kicking a hole in the wall, kicking a hole in the door, smashing the window, or that is not normal wear and tear. That is damage. Okay, and that should be able to be subtracted from their security deposit. Okay, so to avoid those issues, what I try to do is to clearly list the responsibilities of the tenant during the moving process. I let them know what my expectations are in terms of sanitary conditions, in terms of trash and waste from the unit. Make sure they put it out on these certain dates in trash cans and things like that, to avoid citations from the city or the county. And if you're in an apartment, I don't have any apartments, but if you're in an apartment building, you may want to include sort of information about what to do during the common areas of your building. You obviously don't want people putting trash in the hallway, or doing kind of things in the common area. Okay, So that's if you're dangerous or having something's dangerous in the dangerous debris or whatever in the common areas. So to avoid potential issues when a tenant moves out, it's really a good idea to implement the move in and move out process, which I kind of alluded to a little earlier on. I verify with the tenant, walk through the house, and we go through room by room to verify the condition of the property on the day of move-in, and we do the same thing on the way out when they are leaving. We go through the inspection checklist and verify the condition of the property on the way out, and therefore anything that's damaged is because of the tenant. I like to do that together with a tenant, as opposed to some landlords. They just tell the tenant just do a walkthrough or whatever and leave, and just leave a key behind. And I personally like to do the walkthrough with a tenant. In that way, if there's any issues, any disputes, we can deal with it together. If there's damage, I can say, here's the damage. They can see it. Otherwise, if they're not there, they're going to say, well, it was okay when I left it. And it could be an issue there. So again, it's really important to to pay attention to that property damage, because that is a very, very big dispute issues with a lot of tenants, because they want their money back, all of it. And if you, in order to protect yourself, you want to withhold items, monies that that was caused by the tenant while they lived there. Number 5 is another dispute area. Number 5 is what I call habitability issues. By law, the tenant has a right to live in your home. Okay, which means that you, as a landlord, you're responsible to provide a property that's clean and sanitary premises, making timely repairs if something goes wrong, correct any defective items or conditions, and obviously you comply with any health and safety health codes for your rental. That's your responsibility, okay? And I don't think we need to debate that. There's certain responsibilities that you have. You're not a slumlord. Slumlording doesn't really work, in my opinion. So you are responsible for maintaining your property and providing the tenant with a property that meets all the local, state, and federal regulations. Habitability issues is common because it's a common dispute because you're thinking that you expect your house in a certain condition, and the tenant may disagree with you in terms of how it is. Some states now require, in terms of safety, they require what we call disclosures. That's a good one. Yeah, disclosures, and specific disclosures about the property that's compliant with the laws. And there are federal, state, and local disclosure laws that you need to be aware of and you need to be compliant with, because if you're not, you could get yourself into quite a bit of trouble. I know that in the DC area, there are lead-based paint disclosures that you have to provide to the tenant. There's some federal disclosures, and there's also local, state, disclosures as it pertains to lead paint, as it pertains to mold. In DC, there's disclosures as it pertains to lead pipes. You got to provide documentation, acknowledgement that you've done if the pipes are potentially leaded or not. And in Washington, there's a quickie one. In Washington, they have what they call a tenant bill of rights. Tenant bill of rights. Okay, yeah, and that is something that you have to disclose to the tenant. You have to inform the tenant of their rights. Okay, and that's required, by the DC government. And so you have to provide that as part of the lease up process, for example. So it's really important to be aware of, what the disclosures laws are, and make sure that you provide the necessary disclosures, because failure to provide those disclosures, may, if not potentially, expose you legally, but also can lead to a lot of tension between you and your tenant, and possibly could cause disputes. This is real. This is, I mean, you can't just say I didn't know. You have to know, what the disclosures are in your state, in your area, and you have to provide them. And so do the research, find it out, and make sure you're compliant, because it's really important for the safety of your tenants and their family that you disclose certain things. And safety is an issue. I mean, you have insurance. Hopefully, your insurance will cover potential liability, but there are, you don't want to be accused of being negligent, and you don't want an excuse or reason for the insurance company to not cover you. If a tenant reports something and you say, "Well, I didn't know," or you didn't respond, then you could be accused of being negligent. Okay, so that's what's it called? Habitability issues. That's a big common dispute. Number 6. Let's have a look. What time we got? 7:37. So the right to repairs. Okay, it's kind of similar to the number 6 in terms of number 5 in terms of habitability. But tenants often make mistakes that you're a landlord prying into their lives. You're poking around their homes, and you want to encroach on their privacy. Okay, but you have the right. You have the right to inspect your property. Okay, as long as it's documented in your lease, you do have the right. Now, it depends on my tenants. It could be anywhere from 3 to 6 months or a year. I like to go through the house and walk through, just to confirm that the house is being taken care of. Okay, and that there's really nothing in that's taking place that violates the lease. So it's important to to kind of walk through your house every now and then, because when you walk through the house, it's a perfect opportunity to identify any items that need to be repaired, and so you can take care of them before they get totally out of control. It's easier to nip it in the bud whilst it's relatively minor. Otherwise, if you don't address it, it could become quite major and could be quite expensive later on. So, so obviously there are some situations where a tenant just won't let you into the unit to make the repairs. Some tenants are just difficult. I mean, it's surprising. They won't let you in. What are you going to do now? But you do have, again, it depends on your lease. And you want to make sure that your lease has the right of entry once you give certain, notice, whether it be 24, 48 hours notice. And if they don't provide you access, it's a potentially lease violation, as long as it's in your lease. It's in my lease, but I don't know what kind of lease you got, but you can get my lease from my website. Plus, also, it's a 20-page lease plus other documents as well. So again, the important thing is that you as a landlord have the right to enter the property to make repairs, to ensure habitability issues and safety issues, as long as you provide the tenant with adequate notice. And adequate notice will depend on the jurisdiction that you're in. Okay, we're getting out to number 7, the last one. Okay, hopefully this was helpful. If it is, please let me know. And again, get your questions together in the chat box. I'm going to go to the Q&A in a couple of minutes, and so on. So the last one is the tenants breaking the lease. That's a dispute items. The tenant or the landlord breaking the lease. A lease is a legal document between you, the landlord, and the tenant. And sometimes tenants just feel like, hey, I just want to leave, or although the document says this, although the lease says that, it doesn't matter. I want to leave here, or I don't agree with those terms. And if a tenant wants to vacate, you do technically can hold them to the lease just as much as you can be held to the lease as well. So, as you know me, turnover, I try to limit and minimize turnover. And but typically most of my documents, my leases or rental agreements is 12 months, and then it becomes month to month thereafter that. So if they want to leave, or if I want them to leave, you just give a 30-day notice, and so on. In DC is a little trickier But the important thing is that there should be some. One of the biggest disputes is pertains to some party wants to break the terms of the lease, and you can. If a tenant leaves, or if it's within that 1 year they want to leave, then technically you do have the upper hand. You could sue them for whatever it is that they didn't pay. And but sometimes it's just not worth the hassle. Sometimes you just move on because the cost of trying to take them to court and go through that whole bureaucratic process, it may or may not be worth it. I'll leave that up to you. But abandon the property, they need to be aware that abandon the property because, especially if it's not a legitimate reason, it's a big deal. It has serious consequences, and they can be held liable for any expenses or any losses that you incur. So, but the important thing is that that verbiage needs to be in the lease, and you can technically, I suppose, use part of their deposit or hold part of their deposit towards to covering any losses that you incur. So that's number 7. Let me give my final thoughts on all this. As I said before at the beginning, communication is the key to avoid a lot of the issues or problems, challenges that you're going to experience as a landlord, especially landlord-tenant disputes. Is communications. Usually, as long as it's not an adversarial relationship, usually you can work things out with most tenants. So get into the habit of proper communication with your tenants. And because if you can do that, you can avoid a lot of stresses in your relationship with your tenant. What I found is that happy tenants equals happy landlords. Happy tenants equal happy landlords, and which also leads to longer stress-free tenancies. And landlords should view the tenants as their customers. It's a mindset, and put them, if possible, at the first. Because if your tenants are happy, they're going to pay the rent, they're going to take care of the property, they're going to be pleasant to deal with, and finally they're going to stay a long time. As I said, my longest tenant this year is 27 years. 27 years. I have another tenant. I just looking at her documents today. Hers is the 15th year, and I got 18 and 20 years, and so on. So I'm just giving you, that's not to brag or anything. I'm just sharing with you. There are disputes. You will have disputes with your tenants, but those disputes can be resolved. And I've found that good communications is the heart of why I don't have as many disputes and problems that a lot of other landlords have. So with that said, my friends, let me just quickly run through the list of 7. First one is non-payment of rent. That's a common dispute. Number 2 is the security deposits. Number 3 is the pet deposits. Number 4 is property damage. Number 5 is habitability issues. Number 6 is the right to repair. And then finally, number 7, tenant breaks the lease. These are the most common dispute items as a landlord. So hopefully that was all well. I'm going to kind of go on to the what's it called? So enter your questions in the chat box. I'm going to go to the Q&A session now, and let's go down to it. If you want to email me, you can also email me at joe@joeasamoah.com. joe@joeasamoah.com. Let's get down to the questions and let's see what's out there. Okay. Let's have a look. This is K2DA. K2Da. I'm not sure. That's an interesting name. I have a tenant not paying their rent and claiming they have black mold. Okay. I asked them to take pictures of the mold and the mold area and set up a date to have an inspector come by. The tenant has gone silent. Okay, so this is from K2Da. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. So he has a property. I'm not too sure what state you're in. Maybe you want to let us know. And your tenant's not paying the rent, and they're claiming black mold. So they're trying to use the fact that the property is has some health and safety issues as a reason why not to pay the rent. You've asked them to provide you with documentation, proof, and set up a date for the inspection, and now they're gone silent. I have a funny feeling there's ulterior motives from the tenant. You're doing what you have to do. If you want to, what the other thing you could do is provide them with a notice that a date, maybe 48 hours notice, that you intend to have somebody come over, and look at the issue, and then possibly to correct or remediate the situation. So, rather than just waiting for the tenant to respond to you, it's probably a good idea if you are proactive and acknowledge that you received the notice, or that the tenant has made you aware, and you want to document the fact that you've made attempts, or you're making attempts to resolve the issue. So I would definitely email, communicate, text with the tenant, put it in writing, and also suggest maybe 1 or 2 dates when you can have somebody come over, your repairman, your handyman, and so they could, have a look and take care of it. It sounds like the tenant is not being very cooperative, but you want to protect yourself and make sure that you can prove that you've been responsive in trying to address the issue. In terms of the actual rent, you're going to have to go with whatever the laws are in your state. I would definitely, file paperwork. If you feel comfortable, you can do it yourself. Otherwise, go through an attorney, and for the non-payment, because what the tenant is going to do is going to use the issue with the mold, if you go in front of a judge, as the reason why they didn't pay. And if you can prove to the judge that you've been on it, you've been trying to access the property, get access to the property, so you can take care of it, you stand a better shot, rather than not doing anything or not having anything documented. And then the tenant can say, well, Your Honor, this place is not safe, it's hazardous, it's cancer causing, and so on. Good question. Okay, I think you continue. I told them they have to give me a time to fix the problem, 14, 21 days in my state, and they have to give me access to the property to fix the problem. I told them they have to continue to pay the rent. Yeah, you're doing the right thing. I wouldn't leave it for 14 to 21 days, though. I would be more inclined to resolve it as soon as possible. 14, I mean, it's mold, it's black mold, it's toxic mold. There could be some health issues, and I think you should give them 48 hours notice, not 14 to 21 days, because you don't know. Mold can be, a major health issue if it's not addressed. So you don't want to kind of expose yourself to that. Okay, you continue. This tenant often makes false claims and then cuts off communications. Plus, they are on a month-to-month lease. Okay, if they're on a month-to-month lease, then you could give them a 30-day notice, and and as long as you give enough notice per your local jurisdiction, you should be okay. Okay, wow, this is a long question, KTD. I have enacted. Okay, your next question. I have enacted a pet deposit as a separate fee to cover damage from the possession of a pet. The only problem is my tenant claiming the animal is no emotional support. That is an issue. If the tenant claims that their animal is an emotional support animal, then that severely ties your hands as to what you can do, because technically they do have the rights. I would ask for documentation, proof, that they are in fact an emotional support dog or animal, and because if they are, technically you're not supposed to even collect a security deposit or a pet deposit. But I would definitely speak to an attorney in your area, or do some research in terms of what the laws are, because you kind of go into a gray area in terms of the emotional support animal. There are some tenants who are really abusing this law, and they have a pet. Your lease says no pets, and this way they can get a pet in there without you having anything to say about it. So just be careful again and see what's going on. Let's have a look. You continue. For emotional support, I asked for documentation for their certificate. Yes, I think you did the right thing. For emotional support animals, I asked for documentation of their certification of the animal in question. I think you did the right thing there. That's all you can do. What are some of the tips to screen potential Section 8 tenants? Oh, wow. This is from Tammy. Hi, Tammy. What are some tips to screening potential Section 8 tenants? Well, tips. Screening tenants is a whole discussion by itself. It's a whole program, live stream just by that alone. I am very, very, very thorough on my screening because I'm of the the belief that it's easy to get someone in your house, but it's a lot more difficult to get them out. So if you don't screen well, you're setting yourself up for failure. A lot of landlords, unfortunately, don't screen well. They fall for the okie doke from tenants. Some tenants are what I call professional tenants. They know the law better than you do. They know what to say in such a way that you hear what you want to hear, and they're good. I mean, I've had people come into my properties and asking me to pray with them because the Lord told them that this is the house and all this kind of stuff. So screening is very, 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 very important. If you don't do well on this, you have my commiserations. Okay, so what do I do for Section 8? I do the same thing whether it's Section 8 or not Section 8. You got to be careful about having two types of screening policies, one for Section 8 and one for non-Section 8. You could set yourself up there legally for a bit of problem. So I just have one set of screening, which I do for all my tenants, regardless of whether they are Section 8 or not. Obviously, they have an application form which they have to fill out. I verify, their identification, and I also do credit checks, eviction checks, current landlord, previous landlords, and I also go to the home to see how they keep their home. I found that if someone keeps their current home in good condition, they're more likely to take care of my property. If they trash and destroy their current house, they're probably going to trash and destroy my house. Okay, let's keep going. K2D, hey, Tammy. Joe has several videos on his screening tips. He does stringent background financial checks. Joe even goes to visit their current rentals to see how they live. Yes, I do. Go to my website. I've got some stuff there. I did a course, in fact, on tenant screening. I may do it again. Who knows? But there are some, I do have some materials on my website you may want to interested in buying, Tammy, that may help you out, because I just believe so strongly about the importance of screening, because one mistake here, it's a nightmare. Okay. K2D again, you're in North Carolina with strong landlord remediation. I'm assuming that means landlord laws. Well, lucky for you, then you're in a pro landlord state, because therefore at least you have some latitude in terms of what you can do. Some states are very pro tenant, and therefore your hands are kind of tied. So good on you if you're in North Carolina. If the state has some good, strong landlord tenant laws. Okay, I've got some questions. Put them in the chat box. We're going to wrap it up in a few minutes. So I may be able to answer one more question, but put it in if you want to. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up for today. And I think it was a good session today. Hopefully you enjoyed it. This one is from Sasina Dejefu. Hopefully I pronounced that well, Sasina. Good evening. Have you had issues of over-occupancy? For example, you executed a lease with 3 occupants and discover 7 in the unit, including pets and children. Oh boy. Yes. The important thing is that, first of all, you state clearly who is allowed to occupy the property. So that should be occupants. So in your case, it sounds like there were 3 that were supposed to be occupants of the house, and then you find out they've brought in another 4 people. So what you want to do is in your lease is to differentiate between an occupant and a guest. Okay, legally they're not the same. A guest, because they're going to turn around and say, well, these people they don't live here, they're guests. Okay, and therefore you have to define what a guest is, and hopefully your lease does that. Mine does. Guest in my lease is anyone that stays less than 14 days. So you can stay there 14 days continuously. At that point, you become an occupant. If you're an occupant, then what's it called? There are certain things that you can and can't do. So again, it's really important. Over occupancy, it could, especially if you're paying utilities, especially the water, you're going to have more wear and tear on the property because there's more people there than there should be. You got pets in there which aren't supposed to be there. The best thing to do if you find out that they have more people there than they should be, again, it depends on your lease. If your lease says who should be living there, then technically it becomes a lease violation. They are violating the terms of your lease, and therefore, depending on your state, you have some recourse. If someone doesn't abide by the terms of the lease, there's certain things that you can do. So that's what I would do. If you discover, you can provide proof, because they may turn around at the court and say, Your Honor, so-and-so doesn't live here, or we don't have a dog. So you better have some strong proof, either from your neighbors so they can verify, or you have some photographs, or you've gone into the property and confirmed for yourself, okay? Because the tenant is going to deny that, and therefore becomes your word against their word. Is he say, she say, and so on. So it's a difficult one over occupancy. It's difficult to prove in court, but hopefully you got a good relationship with your tenant. Sorry, not tenant, your neighbors, because they know if there's a lot of people in the house, if they know if there's animals in the house, and therefore they can provide you with some good information, because you don't have the time to go there every day, and so on. So it's a little bit tricky, but that's what I would do, Cecina, is look at your lease, make sure it's a lease violation, i.e. these people aren't supposed to be there. I'll get some kind of confirmation from neighbors, or if necessary, do a walk through the house. Arrange a time whereby you can do a walk through a house. Again, I hope that your lease allows you to do that. And if they are violating the lease and you want this person out, then I will then start the process to either to evict or file the process in the court, so that way you can get the ball rolling. It is now 8 o'clock. Good evening, Mr. Marlon. Hope all is well with you. I enjoyed our time on Sunday with Tonita and Eileen, and we had a good time down at the Miss Shirley's restaurant, in Annapolis, Maryland. Had a very, very nice brunch. First time I've been, that place is busy. Oh my goodness, it was busy. It was there when we had to wait like 45 minutes to get served. Guests are allowed on the lease for 48 hours only. All tenants are listed by name. Okay, therefore I think you've got some recourse here. My guests are 21 days, so yours only 48 hours. So it sounds like your tenant is clearly violating the terms of your lease. Therefore, I think that if there are people who aren't listed on your lease who are living there, and you can provide proof, then you should be able to file paperwork in your courthouse and to start the eviction process. Okay, last question. How often do you go live? I go live every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. And every Wednesday, 7 p.m., I am here. We'll pick different topics, spread the word. I'll keep doing this for a few more months, and then I may do something else. But until then, every 7 p.m. Wednesday evening, you can find me here. So that's it. It's now 8 o'clock. I'll wish everybody a good evening, and I'll see you guys next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Dr. Joe signing out. Take care. Bye for now.